many of you are aware that this is a public service initiative that's offered in conjunction with the BC ACC and the Other School, which offers this wonderful venue for us. And I am one of the coordinators along with Suzanne, and we are just so delighted to have various speakers come and present some really wonderful, great information and ideas. And I'm going to mention, before I introduce Lisa, that Susanna is going to record the workshop. And we're pretty discreet. If someone has something of a private nature that they speak about, we'll edit it out. But typically, if you can just hold your questions, especially those ones that are closer to your heart, until afterwards, after Lisa's finished, then we can do a question and answer, and then it's, you know, your privacy is retained. And I also wanted to say that as part of the Skills for Mindful Living series, we're always open to new speakers. So for those of you who are registered clinical counselors, that's such a tongue twister, isn't it? I invite you to contact me by email, debjbraun@me.com. It's always on the handouts. And give some suggestions, because we're really open to offering a broad range of lectures. So I would really welcome those. And so now, without further ado, we were so delighted when we got this submission from Lisa. We were all sitting around coordinating the series, and, you know, we talk about addictions and video gaming and blah, 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 and we're like, oh, play, what fun. So play works, the necessity of play as we grow up. So Lisa comes with a Master of Counseling, a BFA, and works with play and not play, and is the creator of Necessary Shenanigans. She has over a decade of experience studying, performing, and teaching both clown and theater, and internationally and nationally. Her private counseling practice is body-based and works at creating more space and lightness in our bodies. Doesn't that sound good? Relationships and lives. She loves discovering the intersections between disciplines, looking for ways to destabilize, play with, and recreate commonly held ways of knowing and being, both in society and as individuals. So without further ado, Lisa Voth.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I also work in counseling, and so I have definitely had my share of addiction lectures and workshops and classes, and ones on stress and what other good things do we have as counselors? Stress, trauma, all of those kinds of things. And I find that play is part of all of those. That's what is amazing. I don't think it's a separate thing. So it's exciting to see how the spirit of what we're going to talk about today filters into my practice as a counselor and also as a facilitator. How many of you are in the wellness service providing fields that are here? Okay, just curious, because I sense there might be a large amount. So I'll talk a little bit about what I do. I'll talk a little bit about play. I wanted to just leave this on the board if you had a long time to read before we started. So a lot of what I do is looking at how play relates with change, and how we see, how we often view play is also how we're viewing change. Because play often allows room for change, it allows space for change and growth and different pathways to be formed and us to take different turns that we might not normally. So both change and movement. I would say play is strongly related simply to change and to movement. So anytime when we do something a little bit different, or move our bodies in a different way, or move down the street in a different way, move our minds in a different way, I would consider it, in a sense, play. Getting to some more space around some really common patterns. This will make more sense as we go, so I'm just starting with a little overview. But my teacher always said that if we're not playing, we get stuck in image management. So that idea of this is how we look as functional human beings, and this is how we have to be as counselors or as service providers or as whatever it is your profession is. This is how we have to be as people walking down the street in the city of Vancouver. This is how I am downtown. This is how I am on Commercial Drive. This is how I am in Kitsilano. And we get very stuck, up to including in our faces, in our bodies, in the way we move them, in the way we can meet people's eyes or not, all of those things. So the idea of play is brought in just to loosen all those things up and throw them up in the air a little we'll get more into what specifically I'm talking about. Yeah. So I have a practice. I have a couple years of private practice where I do more somatic-based work, so working with the brainstem, so that system that goes all the way through our body minds, as opposed to just the frontal lobe, which is more the analytical. This is why I have this problem. This is what's going on analytically. My mother did this, my father did that. I can understand it here. And then going back into the brainstem and thinking, how is our body carrying that message, and how do we shift this part that, even though it knows something, it still feels awful? How do we change this part in our bodies? So that's what my private practice is about. And then also, I do a lot of facilitation in groups and organizations, in different corporations occasionally, those kinds of things, working team building, all those self-care workshops, and that's another part of my job. And then teaching theater, normal clown theater as well. So there's a few things that I do. And I feel like that's a good balance for me personally. If I end up in a counseling room for too long, even though it's not necessarily heavy all the time, but it's still, I start to feel, no, too much focus in a direction that maybe I need other things. I need to move other things as well. So that's how I work. I call it the practice of play sometimes, because I think in the same way as you think of meditation, in the same way you think of yoga, I kind of think of this lightening up of our bodies, this lightening up of our mind sets as a practice as well, that you can actually do things about, really practical things. So I was thinking, here was a thought. You don't have to do it. But since I imagine there's some degree of awareness around mindfulness or taking a couple breaths, those kinds of things, I don't think they'll be too scary for anybody. I would invite you, in a moment, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, or rest your eyes on the floor, or do whatever makes you feel most comfortable. You don't have to change your posture or anything. You can just stay just how you're sitting. And imagine for a moment that everybody in this room was here to play with you. Just take a moment with that thought and just see what happens as you imagine that. So close your eyes, or rest them on the floor, and just drop into your body this idea that, what if I thought that everybody here was here to play with me? Take a couple breaths. Come back into the room. Peek at your neighbor. Did anybody notice anything? I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I thought, gee, that would be fun.
It'd be a different way to walk through the world, that's for sure, yeah.
Pardon me?
It would be a different way to walk through the world,
yeah.
That's for sure, yeah. Anybody else notice anything? Yeah.
I just wanted to end with a bunch of grown-up children.
But there's maybe a bunch of grown-up children, yes. Any other thoughts? Did anybody notice? Yeah.
I went back to kindergarten.
Yeah.
Which I guess was all about play.
Yeah.
And I find I was smiling.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
There's like a softening or a lightness.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed I took this giant breath. Were you going to say something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just that, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Because I'm not used to standing in front of people and giving a presentation, I'm either used to counseling, so I listen a lot, or I'm used to facilitation, which means that you guys talk, or I'm used to performing, but that's in a way a clown, which is always interplaying. So I might ask you to do a few things today. So yeah, that idea that we just gave our brain stems possibly a different message than they normally walk around the world with. This idea that, maybe these people are here to play. Maybe these people are here to have a little fun with me. Maybe. And it is interesting what can happen in here when we give ourselves those messages. So I have another idea. And this idea, have you guys ever done a thumb wrestle?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you know, can I have somebody help demonstrate it just for those who have never done a thumb wrestle? Does anybody know who's competent? Okay, can you come up here for a second? So a thumb wrestle, you take the hand of the person next to you, and you, can everybody see that? And then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, oops, I declare a thumb war. And then you have to try to get the other person's thumb and pin it. And I just won. Thank you. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is find somebody in the room. It could be a person right beside you. It could be somebody behind you. And have a little thumb war with them. That's, stand up if you can. Find somebody.
You ready?
Find somebody.
Sure, sorry.
And notice what comes up within you as I ask you to do this. If it's total hatred, that's great. If it's find a person. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and start after that. Forget the rest of the rhyme. 1, 2, 3, 4, and go.
Play for a long time. You want to do the other hand?
You can have a seat for a second after you're done. Oh, there's some standoff here. That's a good fight. We're just having a longest knot and never-ending thumb war. Somebody kind of won there for a second.
Oh, yeah. 3 for 3.
Oh, you won the third one. Who won? I'm just curious. All right, so that was the first version. So now what I would like you to do, and again, I'm just going to ask you in the spirit of this mindfulness idea, just ask you to notice what happens as I ask you to do all these things. If you hate me, that's great. If you hate even the idea of standing up, that's great. If you feel like this, just appreciate that for now, because that's part of it. So yeah. The next one I'm going to ask you to do, and you can see on the picture, is I'm going to get you, we're going to try to connect the entire room. And so this is going to be a little bit interesting. So that means you can have pods of 4 people that are in the same one. Because you stand up, can you come over here? So as you can see on the picture, you got...
I want to be a lefty, though.
You want to be a lefty?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. That's fine. So, and you're going to create, actually let's get in groups of 4, and let's not try to connect the whole room yet. And you're going to have it, so the same thing, 1, 2, 3, I don't know how you do this, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go. And so whoever gets a thumb first, whoever gets a thumb first in this one wins. Yeah. I also have really long thumbs. Okay, find a group of 3 or 4. Make your hands look something like that. Negotiate with the lefties because they have rights too. And
Are you right with right hand? Yep.
being a lefty wasn't so bad.
Your boots be the eyes.
No, see, I'm in the middle. Well, I just put myself by something usually. So, did you say? Okay, yeah, we can.
And when you're done, have a seat. All right. This is just so I don't have to stand up here and talk, because that would be awful for an hour and a half. Anything you noticed? Anything that came up? What did you, anybody have a little bit of resistance? I'm curious about that. I always have resistance, even to telling me to stand up, and I hate it. Okay. Anybody else notice anything else?
I think the larger group allowed for a more playful level somehow.
Yeah. And we also had done a little bit with just one person, and then we had progressed to having 4 people, and so then the safety builds a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
It's better to act than to think about it. Like before you think about it,
Yeah.
act. The thinking doesn't get in the way.
Yeah, nice.
Like a
Yeah.
shark.
Again, we're talking about being down in the brainstem possibly more than in the and analyzing what's the exact best strategy for winning this thumb war. I'm gonna figure this out. If I can stretch my joints and I don't know exactly the strategy you try to find, but okay, anybody else? Any other thoughts, any comments? How was that? Yes?
Kind of forces you to get rid of your inner judge. You just have to let go
Yeah.
of that in this moment.
Yeah. Was there some inner judges though, like this is stupid, why are we doing this? I'm gonna look stupid, is it? Usually there's like at least some, but maybe everybody that came to this workshop is like pretty gung-ho to play. That's another possibility. Usually every workshop that I do, I get people to start by drawing their play judge, and it's the one that judges them for playing. And then I make them put speech bubbles, and they usually have some really great ones that tell them all sorts of nasty things when they start to play or start to connect or start to be goofy in that way. So what we're looking at in this case a little bit is this idea of switching things up from what we thought they were going to be, or letting in new information. So for example, you thought you were coming to a presentation, and usually the presentation is the speaker and then the people, and there's not, and they listen to the speaker, and there's certain constructs around that. So what we're doing is switching that up a little bit. And sometimes, not everybody maybe, but sometimes you can start to feel that little friction, or that little like, no, this isn't what's supposed to happen, or no, we're supposed to stay in our chairs, or no, I'm not supposed to have to stand up. And so we're shifting that a little bit. And a little bit what we're working with when we do this is the neocortex, as seen here by an Oreo cookie. So the neocortex is this part in our brain that's in the front. Glenn, you could probably correct me on some of this, but I've reduced it down to its essential, I think, as an Oreo cookie. One side, this is why I think it's important to play as adults. So one side of that Oreo cookie is it's 6 layers actually, but so 2 of those layers on one side is the sensory and sensual layers, and those are really active when we're little. So when we're little, we're picking up things, we're touching things, we're seeing things, we're picking up new information all the time through all of our senses. We haven't really thought about it, we haven't really categorized it yet. It's all just coming in and we're letting it in all the time. You see kids' eyes, and they're very different than adult eyes often in terms of how they'll be watching the world. And then on the other side of the Oreo cookie, we have what's called the mental representation layer. And so that's the side where we have figured it out. This is what a presentation looks like. This is what I am like. This is what we walk like down the street. This is what I call angry. This is a bad thing. This is a sad thing. This is a mad thing. We have all these different categories for all of these things in our lives. We figured it out. We've labeled them. We know what to do with them. And then there's this part in the middle, the gooey white stuff in the Oreo cookie, that's actually the zone of creativity. So when when this part of our brain that's figured everything out opens up just a little bit and allows in new information or new ideas, then creativity can start to happen. And that's the juicy part. That's where we take these adult patterns and start to invite in new ideas into them. And so I think that's one of the reasons play is really important. So an example could be a child that feels bad, or wow, if we reduce it down to its essentials. The child learns that feeling bad means they are bad. So they create this pathway, this link, this connection of this is what it means to feel bad. It means something's wrong with me, for example. And we do these kinds of things all the time. We have all these kinds of links. So, and then the adult plays with them, and if we start to play with the meaning that's created around this idea, this link that's been made, maybe it means that we could start to separate it out. We could start to tease those 2 ideas apart, unmarry them, and maybe connect this idea with, I feel bad with, oh, I need a hug. Or I feel bad with, oh, I need to go and run a marathon today. I don't know who has that idea, but, or I feel bad and what's another thing? I feel bad and I should probably just take some time or I should probably go to this playground. I don't know. But we start to break down those ideas and those structures and those ways things are in our heads. Yeah. So an example, yeah, this is another example of the same thing. So how thoughts often work in a very rough form is, they don't necessarily originate here, but we'll do this for now, is a thought like, I am not very humorous, I am not a funny person, for example. That's a thought. So then our brain starts looking for things that support that story. So, oh look, no one laughed at that joke I just made. That was really funny, but no one laughed. Okay, so then we get this message into our guts, our bodies respond. Actually, it might be the other way around. We could probably go from body to head, because that's usually the way it's going. But that says where our stomach actually starts to feel ashamed, or we start to feel that embarrassment. This gives the message again to maybe a message of isolation. I probably shouldn't be hanging around people that are funny anymore. And again, this idea of I'm not very humorous. So we kind of form these little tracks that are like this. And this idea of play, again, this breaking of those tracks, this breaking of those constructs that we hold in our brains, this breaking of those neural pathways, those fixed, well-grooved neural tracks that go through our entire beings, is finding all of a sudden, oh, I find that thing funny. Or, oh, that person found me funny. Or, oh, that was the moment that everybody did laugh. And we start to have to find these parts and put them on the map, or make whole new maps. And I feel like that's a little bit of what play is as well, is finding these new ways to look at the world. And giving ourselves as permission, or giving ourselves as adults permission to do those kinds of things. In spite of these really strong neural pathways, these really strong mental constructs of how things are and how they should be. So, a little bit about where...
Both parents and counselors.
So, a little bit about where I came from and how I even got to some of these ideas is, yeah, I grew up with 2 counselor parents. I had a friend that also grew up with 2 counselor parents. And I remember once in grade 8 joking in a science class, he said, I told my mom I was short. I felt short the other day. No, he said, he thought he was short. His mom looked at him and said, I just ruined the entire story. But his mom looked at him and said, and how does short make you feel? And we always laughed about that. Oh, goodness. So yeah, 2 counselor parents. And a lot of it was really spent up in the frontal lobe analyzing and trying to figure things out. And a lot of talk about emotions, and a lot of trying to understand emotions, and a lot of trying to understand relationships, but often really cerebrally. And often with an incongruence in terms of what was actually going on in the body and what was actually going on in the relationship, or the person wasn't necessarily matching what was being said. So I grew up believing that the truth contains more gravity than levity. So if I'm going to say something, I'm going to go tell my friend something true, I'm going to tell her the truth, that generally in our minds means, oh, I'm going to tell her something heavy, or I'm going to tell her something really grave, or rather than I'm going to tell her something true and it's going to be the best thing in the world. I'm going to tell her about this amazing time I had. The truth often gets equated, I feel, with that gravity. I grew up believing that personal change happens through hard work. So only if we're working hard, only if I'm going to 6 counseling sessions where I cry in every single one of them, that's where change is going to happen. Whereas that really amazing weekend that I had camping away, or that night that I spent laughing all night long with my friends, how could that be personally transforming? How could that bring change? And so that was a belief that I had. And I worked hard, I tell you, for a long time. And I grew up, you have to excuse me, because some of my notes were on here, and now there's a little bit change in terms of what I could bring up on my screen. So I'm a little out to lunch here. But okay, so the solemn tasks are to be taken more seriously. Again, if I'm going to go play with a kid on my street, that's going to be different than if I go to my counseling job. Or if I'm in, I just have very different, I give different ones. I give solemn tasks perhaps more weight, more significance. And I grew up believing that the solemn is more important, real, or true than the silly. So it's a little bit of what's been said, but yeah, again, that value judgment on what is important and what I should be paying attention to, and what is going to change me, or what is going to help me, or what is going to help the world. And so, I'm just going to see here. I think I might have, no. Yeah, that's that. Actually, just let me see something. Oh yeah, here it is. It's this quote that I found once that I read when I was first starting to do more work in this area, and it said, "We've been taught to believe that negative equals realistic and positive equals unrealistic." It's similar in scope, I feel like this, again, this idea that something that is real and true, probably heavy. Something that is positive or light, probably, I don't know, just not as significant. And there's reasons for that, and we'll talk about that. It makes sense on an evolutionary viewpoint, but I'm curious about turning that on its head a little bit. And so then, what I did was I got into theater, and that was really a lot more about the body and about what was going on in my body and in relationships in a really physical way, and I got into clown. And not clown so much in terms of birthday party clowns, or even red-nosed clowns, or big feet clowns, or red, orange, purple wig clowns, but clowns that played with who they were and what they did in the world, and were light with it. And one of the most amazing gifts that a clown can give to their audience is being honest with whatever it is that is going on, and whoever they are, for real, and share that. So in this one, for example, and this is Whoa Nelly, and it was called Rock Opera, and I think I came on singing a very dramatic aria of some sort while having to drag around a giant rock all the time. And so it was all about my relationship with this rock that I had to drag around. And I think in the end it ended with I Believe I Can Fly, which then crashed and I couldn't fly, and me carrying on with this giant rock off the stage. So there's often a lot of your humanness in it, or a lot of your struggles in it, or a lot of your pain in it, and that's what I found really amazing. It was some of the hardest work that I'd ever done, was getting light in my body and not taking myself so seriously. That was probably continues to be the hardest work that I've ever done. But it's also probably the most rewarding and unendingly satisfying in this weird way kind of work that I've done. And it's often, and as a result of that, play has really become an indicator in my life of where I need to work, or where I need to pay attention, or where I need to focus. If I find something that I'm struggling with that I can't laugh at, that feels really, really heavy, it's often an indication that I need to mindfully explore that I need to find some safety for that. We'll talk about that later, and that I need to start finding a way to play with that. How can I get lighter? All those areas, the clown is greedy, they kind of want to play with everything. So the pains and the hurts and the fears and the relationships that don't work and whatever else it is, they want to play with it all. So that was a real curiosity for me. And that started to shift some of those ideas that I had found for myself at least, and also very specifically in the world of my parents as counselors. I don't think all counselors are like this, but this heavy world that I've kind of grown up in, of trying to figure things out up here. And so, let's see. Oh yeah, this was, I think, Pride Parade a while ago. I think I was with the Carnival Band. And it says, this is a quote that I found, our intention is to affirm this life, not to bring order out of chaos, nor to suggest improvements in creation, but simply to wake up to the very life we're living, which is so excellent once one gets one's mind and desires out of its way and lets it act of its own accord. It's by John Cage. And so another shift when I went into the counseling world was just this idea that we weren't trying to improve ourselves anymore. The idea with clown is that you could use everything, and that you could actually play with everything. And you didn't have to try to make it better. You didn't have to try to change this aspect of yourself or get rid of this other one or shut this thing out. It was this idea of changing relationship with all those aspects of yourself so that you could play with them, so that you could see them as lighter, so that you could have some fun, so that they could transform and change and shift in your life. I don't think I would have normally played with the idea that I had to carry around a weight, whatever that weight might be symbolically for you, but that idea of how can I get light enough around this thing that I carry around on my back all the time without ceasing, that I can't get rid of? How can I play with that? How can I extend that and look at myself from a bit of a distance mindfully and go, oh yeah, Lisa, it's okay. Yeah, it sucks, and it's okay. Whatever that attitude might be that you might bring in that way. So here's a list. So I shared some of my beliefs that I grew up with. And here's a list of different myths, beliefs, and culturally agreed upon ideas, I think, in terms of play. So, and what I'm going to ask you to do is just pay attention and see if there's one or two that maybe strike you. And I might get you to have a little conversation afterwards. But the first one is every minute spent playing is a lost opportunity to get ahead in life. 2, play is for children. 3, people want to or don't want to play with me. This is a big one. 4, I must finish my work and then I can play. 5, play is silly. 6, silly is a waste of time. 7, when we're stressed, we can't be playful because it takes too much energy. 8, if I'm playing, I sacrifice credibility. 9, when times are stressful, I've got to buckle down and get serious. 10, play is only useful for educational purposes. 11, if I'm playful, I won't be taken seriously. 12, the solemn and or serious is more real and needs more energy than the playful. 14, work gets more done than play. 15, work then play. 16, I have to settle down to the work at hand or I won't get anything done. 17, play is a diversion from real work. 18, play is not profitable. 19, play isn't serious. So those are some ideas. And maybe just find one person that's around you in some way and see if you can share with them what's the one that kind of struck you a little bit more than the others. Let them know and have a little conversation. Or is there a couple that kind of stuck out at you and you can let them know whatever you'd like.
Why you can't see those changes?
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's just, I think that, you know, I see, oh, sure, you have to, you
whatever it is, that is a sensation. But I do,
Take another 30 seconds or so, finish up.
yeah.
Nobody pays attention.
Smudged on my face.
Finishing up whatever it is you're saying.
My hair was probably my hair was white.
Just realized,
No. Thank you.
And finishing up whatever your last thoughts are.
You're all very
How is this one way better? I didn't mean to distract us away from that because I've got 100 ideas just
Any thoughts? Anything come up in your conversations
Now we need jump here.
that you want to share with a giant group of people? Yeah.
Definitely something for me is that, which says probably a lot about who I am, is that the first thing came to mind is, well, I'm not good at playing. And so
Yeah.
the idea that play is yet another thing to be mastered on that list.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't make any sense, but that's what comes to mind. My first thing, but I have to get good at that. So I'm at workshops, I can learn how to play, and then I'll be good at that. Then I can master it.
It's true, right? Yeah, I didn't really, yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I should put that one on there too. I'm not good at play. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about that right now. Because yeah, in a sense it is one of those things that, oh, now I have to get good at that, or oh, now I should be better at that. I guess it's what it's important to you, I suppose, or what your values are. So this is me promoting a big value of mine. And something that has saved me in a million ways. And maybe it's not the thing that goes on the list for now, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts that came up?
I mean, we're such a work-oriented culture, you know,
Yeah.
that it's very difficult, especially if you've been a student for a long time. I mean, isn't it, you know, constantly that sense of, oh, I didn't get my paper done. You know, that guilt,
Yeah.
you know, that you have all this to do and then before you can play. So, and that's pretty much, I mean, I think very ingrained in the culture that you have to work first, and then, you know, that's your reward for working. You get to play.
Yeah.
But that play is somehow not part of the work.
And that we couldn't do both at the same time, or
Yeah,
there's a
they're
disconnect in terms
mutually
of work or
exclusive.
play. Yeah. Or that if we play, we won't get our work done. That's another one on there that I.
Or if you're playing it, you're not doing work.
Yeah. Or if I take this moment to lighten up, I'll lose it all, and then I won't get back to the serious work, and as opposed to, if we play sometimes, it seems like things open up a little bit and we can do our work easier. So there's these different conflicting beliefs. Yeah, any other thoughts that people want to share? Yeah.
I've always been very playful. I found myself cutting down on playfulness to fit in many environments. So
Yeah. And then, you know, I always think, so when we are playful and then we have to cut down on our playfulness, sometimes I wonder about that, and I think, well, can we be in an environment that is perhaps less overtly playful, and can we shift our definition of play to meet the people that we're playing with there? You know, and can our definition of play change? So when I'm in a clowning workshop, that's one kind of play. When I'm sitting in a session with somebody that is working through trauma that's living in their body, that's a very different kind of play that I'm working with. And it's a very different level of play, I think. And there I'm just looking for space, or I'm looking for a new experience. I'm looking for somehow to get out of the pathway that we've been on for a while, or that person has been on for a while. And I'm looking for those really subtle things. And I always think play is only as, you know, you can't play without a playmate. So sometimes there's this idea too of, this person, so you have to figure out how to play with whoever it is that's around you. You know, that challenge is always really interesting. And I appreciate when it's just impossible, or when it feels impossible anyways, or when there are those places that really like, you really have to dig deep to find that little player in you that still has that twinkle or that sparkle. Yeah.
And sometimes I think adults have to justify play. So I'm going to join the soccer team, but it's for physical fitness, or I'm going to play bridge to keep my mind sharp, or whatever that is.
Yeah, that's true. These are good ones. I'll watch the video after. Yeah.
I mean, it seems like play is the willingness to look a bit silly and make mistakes. And I think in our work world, at least in my work world, perfection is everything in what we do. And so I think there's not a lot of room for play in our work. So that's something I struggle with.
Do you mind telling what's your work?
I work in a substance use knowledge exchange.
Okay.
It's a very political world. Yeah.
And so even changing that idea of, I'm wondering if sometimes the word play trips us up too. And can we think of it, could there be ways of inviting lightness in sometimes, or could there be ways of inviting movement, or could there be ways of inviting change? You know, those words might fit even better sometimes, or be a little bit easier to palate, but yeah. Those are the really true, that's where your player, deep in player, has to really work to find out, what's the play here? What's the lightness? What's the moment that I can get out of this, whatever that kind of heavy environment is, and find a breath, or, you know, those kinds of things. Yeah, anybody else? Yeah.
And I think if we let go of the idea that I'm not good at play, or if it's something to be perfected, but rather than more of a practice, like a practice of mindfulness or yoga, and it's not something to be perfected, but moment to moment, exploring those little playful moments. And it's not about being a playful person or good at play, just do it.
Yeah. I would agree. That's why I raised my arms in some kind of angel singing. But it made me, when you were talking, it connected back to what you were saying. And one of my favorite things is when people come into the workshop and say, I don't play. And then for me, especially in the clown world, that's the funny part. Like, that's the part that we play with sometimes, is like that. This is that I'll make my own version, but like, I just don't play. I'm sorry. What do you want from me? I don't play. I'm not playing here. This is not play. This is not play. I do not play. Like, whatever it is that you're not playing with, you can play, you know, and that's all, or I can play very much with the serious part of me, because I get really serious, and so all of a sudden, okay. Right? Oh. So this is about, that's the part, again, that clown, that's the part that the clown can play with. And again, that's related to this mindfulness idea that play isn't something other, but rather just an attitude to bring to what is happening in the moment. And I really like that idea, because it's funny how, once that perspective starts to shift, how many things you can end up playing with, I think. Even just that little bit of lightness and that little bit of being able to, I call it like a 300-foot zoom out, like that 300-foot zoom out where you go into the air and you just look down at yourself, sitting in your chairs right now, and me standing in front of the class right now. And just take a look at how you're sitting and what you're doing and how weird it all is. And just look at your body posture, look at how mine is all weird right now. And I feel like that's sometimes the play, or I'm stuck on my computer in the day, and every once in a while, it doesn't happen all the time, but every once in a while I can get that perspective of, oh my goodness, this is weird. Or, oh, this is, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but this is just one of the masks that I'm playing, and isn't it a weird one? You know? So, I guess, I'm going to think, actually, in terms of the one you just talked about, that one, or one of them that feels the strongest for you in terms of a belief you hold, just imagine for a sec, what would the opposite of that belief be? in your head, you can just imagine, what would the opposite of the belief you just talked about be? One that you might want, one that you might prefer to believe, or one that you might want to challenge yourself to believe, or one that you might want to experiment. It doesn't have to feel true, it just has to be kind of the opposite and something that might be fun to believe. Everybody have one? Okay, sure, you can give me an example. Perfect.
If I am playful, I will enhance my credibility.
When you're playful, you'll enhance
My credibility.
your credibility, yeah. Ah, nice, yeah. I'm still working with that one. Yeah, okay, so you'll enhance your credibility. Anybody else have just an example? We don't all have to say them, but anybody want to say theirs? And if not, that's fine, sure.
If I'm playful, people will take me very seriously.
Yeah. Great. So, and as you say them, or as you're even thinking them, you might notice like a little crunch, or a little like, or in your body, or in your mind, I'm not sure, maybe, maybe not. But what I'd like to do is this idea of a little experiment that I sometimes do with people I work with, and sometimes I do with groups. I can do it with one person, or I can do it with a whole bunch of people. And what I'd like you to do, and I'm going to invite you to stand up again. And this is a fairly simple one to start. For the first maybe 30 seconds or so, what I'd like you to do, you can just take a little walk from where you are and point at things and say what they are. So floor, ceiling, table, chair, camera stand, extension cord. Do that for like 30 seconds. And you can even stand in where you're standing if you want and just point around you, or you can take a little walk if you'd like. Point at like maybe 10 things. Just say what they are. Notice what happens in your body.
Frame. Tripod.
How's it going? Justin! What are you doing here? And I'm going to change the instructions. So now what I'd like you to do is point at things and say something that they are not. So muffin top, hairdo, golf course, songwriter, whatever it is that comes to your mind. You're going to point and say something that it is not. So try that with about 10 things, go as fast as you can. And notice what happens in your body.
Dangerous aliens.
This is a big stretch. Faster, faster. Notice what happens with your breathing. Notice what happens with your bodies. 3 more things really fast. 3 more things really fast. Thank you so much. And have a seat.
I can see
So, what did you notice? What happened especially as you shifted into the next one of saying what something was not? Anybody notice anything in their bodies?
Slows you down.
Slows you down, yeah. A little bit of like a... It's incongruent, it feels incongruent, yeah. Any other comments, thoughts?
It was quite disorienting.
Disorienting? Yeah. Yeah. A little, yeah. Anybody feel like they were lying?
it's funny too.
It was funny? It's funny, yeah. It can be funny. Yeah. Yeah.
You really have to concentrate.
You have to concentrate. You have to be mindful and
Yeah.
bring attention to it, yeah.
It really made you aware of the words that were on your mind somehow.
I know.
It tends to have a theme.
It's like, what is that? The test where the Rorschach.
Yeah.
It's a test. It's like, what's going to come out? I never know, especially when I demonstrate. It's always a bit terrifying. Any other thoughts?
That felt like starting an adventure.
Okay.
Just make something up.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Huh. Yeah. So, and how might that relate to how we see change, or how we shift our patterns about how we think about ourselves in the world? That's my thought, or that's my curiosity, I suppose. And sometimes I'll do this, for example, with somebody who is really, well, all of us are, but it really stuck in a certain way of being, and it's gotten serious, and it's gotten entrenched, and it's gotten, and there's lots of judgment often on being that way and not being able to change or not being able to shift something. And sometimes in the middle of that, I'll ask them, okay, can you point at 5 things, say what they are. They'll point at 5 things, say what they are. And then I'll get them to do the opposite and say what I just asked you to do, basically. And I say, what happened in your body as you named things, new things? These ruts that have been going on for years of like, that's a roof, that's the floor. That's been happening since we were born, but that's, unless you've changed languages, but like, which is its own weirdness in this. It's its own like challenge in terms of like finding all these different pathways and grooves and ways of thinking. And when we change languages, I think it's pretty amazing what happens in the brain. But these have always been these things. And so this idea, in the same way that some of those beliefs have always been those beliefs, I suppose, some of those myths or some of those culturally agreed upon ideas, those have always been there. And so this idea of shifting those neural pathways, of shifting those deeply grooved trenches, and calling something else, is just that. It's just shifting. It's as much as like, has about as much moral significance as like pointing to the floor and saying it's a dog, if you know what I mean. Like we're gonna feel, and often you can feel that little in your body as you do it, or those voices come up of, I'm lying, or this isn't true, or how dare I believe this, or how dare I say this. But does that make sense? Am I explaining myself?
Yeah.
So it's just like a nice way of taking the judgment off of some of those. When we are finding ourselves trying to find that new neural pathway, or we are trying to find ourselves doing something different, it's this idea of, well, basically all I'm doing is elephant, you know, and trying to call something by a different name. Oftentimes, again, our relationship with change will come up with that game, or our relationship with play, or our relationship with shifting. Sometimes we'll get a little sneak preview into that, and so it's kind of an interesting way to go about it sometimes. And as you think about that last list and think about something you'd like to believe more, you might notice it grinding in your head or in your body, actually. Often we stop breathing when we try to think of new things. We hold our breaths and everything clogs up and we stop everything. And yeah, that's often what we do when we approach change as well, in that game we're in our lives. So it's kind of an interesting little experiment I like to do with people. Yeah. So this idea of play as an awareness of what is, I think I have some, here's something I've said before, is creativity and playfulness seem to arise from an awareness of what is. They have more to do with honesty, awareness, and the many ways of being human than developing something extraordinary, original, or exceptionally creative. So that idea of simplifying what it is we think of as playful. Sometimes we get like our uncle who brings the whoopee cushion and wears a Hawaiian shirt in our minds when we think of having to be playful. And this idea of simplifying it and kind of like what you were saying, well, can I play, maybe we can play with this idea of not being playful. Maybe we can play with this idea of not wanting to play with anybody. Maybe we can play with that. And so that's where the mindfulness starts to come in, I think. Let's see if I can figure out this. You're going to see everything here. And awareness of what is first, and then this permission to play or interact in a new way, this permission to change. And permission is something we have to negotiate when we acknowledge that what we're doing is just one of the possibilities available to us. So it's just by chance that got called a floor. It could be called anything, really. It's just by chance that I got the idea that I wasn't good enough. Maybe it could be another possibility. Maybe there could be something else that we could add to the pot. So those kinds of ways of being can change in that way. And then the reconfiguration of old beliefs, patterns, and ideas as the things start to come together, as the ideas start to come together, or the new ways of being start to be invited to the pile. The truly great advances of this generation will be made by those who can make outrageous connections, and only a mind who knows how to play can do that. It's a quote by Nagel Jackson. So, let's see, play. So, we've already started talking about the body, but this is where I feel like it's also I feel like this is a really significant part of my idea about play. It's just this idea that I don't think we can think our way to play, or it's a really hard thing in a way to think our way to play sometimes. They say that about 80% of our information is coming from our body, our brainstem, all of this stuff into our brain, and only about 20% is going from our brain down into our bodies. So trying to think our way into play can be really exhausting, I think. I think there's ways that we play with our minds and that we connect things in that way. But if one of the things we're talking about is a lightness or an ability to change, sometimes I think we have to bring what I call the frame of mind, which is our body, and change that. And that automatically seems to inform or influence what our minds are thinking. So changing our frame of mind, basically, that's what I'm curious about. So when we stand up, even when we stand up, we're already changing our frame of mind. When we go over and connect with somebody else, we're changing our frame of mind. When we do a thumb war, we're changing our frame of mind. And I think that influences our thoughts, that influences our thinking around it. So I believe it's a really physical process. Let me just see if I have... Yeah, I always figure we'd have to go to a lot of counseling sessions to really figure out how to play, depending. But it might be a hard, it's a bit of a judgment. It's not necessarily true. I think there's counselors that are great players. Probably the great counselors are also great players. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about safety and what it requires to play as we go on. But what I'd like to do in the meantime, are there any questions, any thoughts? Anything totally unclear as I open my mouth and shut it over and over and over and over and over again? No? Okay. Yes?
I'm curious about private play versus public play.
Private play versus public play, huh?
Are you making any distinction there tonight? Or?
Huh. Can you tell me a little bit more
Well,
about
what I was thinking is that people play a lot in their relationships because perhaps it's safer and it's more intimate and it's behind a closed door or something.
Yeah.
But in public, they might not be so bold.
Yeah. I think there's truth in that. And I think one of the things we'll talk about in a little bit is this idea of safety and how we can't really have play if there's not safety. And so I think in a lot of those situations, safety with ourselves and safety with the person that we're playing with, those are both really important. And so in an intimate relationship, if that safety is there, of appreciation and acknowledgement and attention, I think, I forget the third one I have written down. Next slide. But if that's there, then yeah, I think you can play with an intimate partner. If we can create that safety in ourselves, if we can create that safety in ourselves, I think we can expand our audience, and I think we can expand our ability to play in different situations. And so I think that's what I would say about that. Yeah. Any other thoughts before we go on? Okay. So, body as frame of mind. So we're looking at this idea of, in play we're often looking at the idea of how do we go from heavy to lighter. And I don't mean that everything is great, but even if everything is not great, can we have more lightness around it? Can we have a little bit more movement? Can we have a little bit more space or breath? And this is me and my sister when we were little. She's now a baker. She's wearing a strawberry shortcake outfit there. And I'm now a clown. And I'm wearing a clown outfit, which is very interesting. And the other day, maybe it was about a year ago, we were having a Skype conversation. She lives in Singapore, and so we Skype. That's our means of communication. And we were getting into one of those conversations that you can only get into with your family that starts to feel so heavy and so like, ugh. And so you can't get out of it, and you get deeper, and then there's these, you're talking about stuff that's really charged, and you both kind of, I don't know, does anybody have that with their family where you get into those, okay. Am I alone? Just those conversations that are really heavy. If you haven't had it with your family members, well, amazing. And maybe you've had it with somebody else. And I remember it wasn't anything awful. It wasn't anything we could fix. It just got really heavy. And I remember we had to hang up the phone, and we didn't know what to do. Like, we couldn't leave each other on this note. It was really kind of awful. And I don't remember who it was, but what I do remember is that one of us, this is a bad shirt to use, one of us kind of like put up our hand or something and went like, yay, sisters. Yay, life. Yay. And then we've named like this stupid situation we're talking about, which I won't say right now. Yay. And we started to do that, and we started to say everything that we were yaying. And eventually, yay, Skype forgets, yay, and we weren't saying just good things, but we were yaying it, whatever it was we were saying, and we were shaking our arms in the air. And then we looked at each other, and it was completely different what was going on. We ended the conversation completely differently, again, by changing our frame of mind, by shifting something, by not staying stuck. And so, yeah, that's the gay thing versus the great heavy, I like to call it. And it was such a good reminder, like a really good real life reminder of like, it's not always the big things. Sometimes it's, I think I have this quote somewhere, but I don't even know where it is, but like standing up if you want to sit could be like a really radical, playful movement. Or making like a little sigh if you just want to stay silent, that could be a really powerful thing for you to do. Making some movement, making some motion. When you're depressed, the last thing you want to do is like wiggle your toes. Tell somebody that's, tell somebody that's down and calling themselves depressed, whatever language you want to use, but to wiggle their toes and they're going to look at you like you're absolutely crazy. Or if you're in bed and having a really hard day and you just think, I'm just going to wiggle my toes. Your body, everything in you is saying, no, don't move. No, why would we even move? This is stupid. But this idea of actually inviting our bodies to move, or actually inviting our bodies to release in some way, can be really powerful. And so, any thoughts on that before we do a little exercise? What I invite you to do again, one more time. Stand up. And, well, I was going to get you to do the gay thing, but, okay, I'm going to get you to do the gay thing. So just, like, take your arm and just, like, do, like, the lamest, uncoolest, stupid, like, you don't really believe in this. And then I encourage you to, like, get a little, like, think of all the things you kind of hate, or all the things you kind of like, or like all the things you didn't like about today, or all the things you loved about today, or that person that you thought was great and wasn't, or that I don't know what. And let yourself extend into moving your arms. And you can think it's the stupidest thing in the world. You can hate me for doing this. You can think, stupid Lisa, she's an idiot. Whatever you want to do. And just move your eyes, and a couple more. Yay, whatever. I don't know. And let yourselves down. And check in and see what's going on right now. Look, how do your eyes feel right now? Do you feel any different? Huh?
Smiley.
Smiley? A little bit smilier, yeah. So, have a seat. It's just the gay thing versus the great heavy. I highly encourage it. Any thoughts about that? Anything you noticed? Anything that you were curious about? There's actually studies at this point that putting your arms in this position, which is they consider a power pose, for 2 minutes actually lowers your cortisol, so your stress hormone, and raises your testosterone. And so this is a variation of that, I suppose. And it's amazing. Yeah, they've done studies where they actually get people to go into interviews, for example, after they've done 2 minutes of the power pose. And the people that are, it's Amy Cuddy, I think, if you watch the TED Talk. But the people that have done it are the ones that are perceived from behind the glasses, the ones that are more competent, and the ones that are more able to do the job, basically. So it's pretty amazing what just changing this frame of mind. And I would consider any movement often a form of play, in very simple form to a very complex form. And so that's the gay thing versus the great heavy. You can do variations of that. You can ask people to bounce up and down. You can bounce up and down yourselves. You can What's another really simple thing is like if you've ever done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Does anybody play this icebreaker? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2. You do 8, 8, 8, 8 with all your limbs, and then you do 4, 4, 4, 4. Then you do 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. All those are just ways of shifting what's going on in your body. Because I don't think we can expect to play with our thoughts or change our mind or move things around up here if this is staying stagnant and in the same frame of mind. It's really hard, I think. I think you can. I think it's not always my forte. Even though a lot of the work I do somatically would be with people who are sitting in a chair and the movement is actually quite subtle, or the movement is actually quite simple, but maybe more internal. So yeah, that's body as frame of mind. This idea that maybe we can invite play just through moving, even if we don't want to. It might shift something of what's going on. And then there is this idea of the big villains. So there are things that come in, there's lots of things that come in the way of play. These are 3. And we'll talk about safety later as well. But the first one is the negativity bias. So this is the evolutionarily helpful bias that we're going to look for a tiger more than we're going to notice the sun on our back. We're going to be watching for the things that could bring us danger more than we're going to often open our eyes to the things that are bringing us delight or bringing us joy or that kind of thing. So that's one of the challenges in terms of play, is just that we're programmed to watch out. The second thing is this idea of discomfort. So again, if it's kind of the same as the point game. So if we've been going down the same neural pathways our entire lives, it's really rutted out. It's really uncomfortable to go into the wilderness with our little bicycle or whatever it is we're riding down our neural pathways. There's blackberry bushes. It's thorny. You get stuck. You feel like you're lying. You are in unknown territory. It's uncomfortable. And let me see if one of my teachers said once, he said, if you should be so lucky as to be uncomfortable in this class. He's like, you can hope that you're uncomfortable, because that means you're getting to push up against something new. But that's not always what it feels like when you're the one pushing up against the uncomfortable thing. That's usually annoying. Or can be annoying. This third one is this idea of just judgments and opinions. So we're, again, going back to mindfulness, we're quick to have judgments and opinions about what it is that's happening rather than curiosity. This can stop play unless we start to get curious about the judgments and opinions, and maybe even have a little laugh at them, or a little moment. And so here's the question. So what about the hard stuff? And this is the quote I was trying to say. Playfulness is a movement, and it is always relative. Standing when you want to sit could be a radical and ridiculous act. Squeaking when you want to keep your mouth shut could be a glorious movement. Playfulness is more than flash mobs. It is the games we play with our creative unfolding. So looking at this idea of, what about when we're not feeling playful? What about when we have hard stuff that's painful that we don't want to play with it? Or that we have, And here's Charlie Chaplin, who says, to truly laugh, you must be able to take your pain and play with it. So that's a high order. It's an interesting challenge, I find, in my life and my curiosity. And I don't think we will arrive. I don't think this is talking about a path we will arrive at the end of, but I think it's a curious thing to point at. So how I sometimes think about it is that if we're running into things in ourselves, or edges, or those hard, kind of sticky places that hurt, or those places that feel really muddy, or those places that feel really, really heavy, often just first of all that awareness of this place, that, oh, I can't play with that. I can't get a lot of movement around that. That's not really all that funny. I'm not going to laugh at it. I can't even laugh right now, for example. And this is where I've been actually for the last couple weeks, so this is interesting to be talking about it. But yeah, these things where I'm like, ooh, no, not funny. So first of all, just being aware of it, that's not a play zone. Okay, then this idea of how can we hold that place for a while and let it know that it's safe. Or let it know that it's okay to be there. This grief that I've been having, how can I actually, I'm not gonna laugh right now. I'm mostly crying. And then how can I notice it, get my hands under it, and just hold it for a little while. It doesn't have to be a plaything. It doesn't have to be something that's funny. It doesn't have to be something that's enjoyable. I don't have to get the lighten up whip out and start whipping myself with it. Lighten up, lighten up, lighten up, lighten up. That's the worst. That's what often happens after. This is related to what you were saying earlier, but this whole idea of going to a play workshop and you leave and you're like, ouch, oh, ah, your back is sore from all the whipping you just did in the lighten up workshop. So holding that thing, and then that idea that I do believe, and maybe some of us have to hold something a lifetime, or maybe some of us have to hold something 2 lifetimes. I don't even know if I believe in lifetimes, but a long time. And until eventually this thing is at that place where you can start to get some space around it, or start to throw it up, or start. The very simple example is that time you stubbed your toe and you couldn't laugh at it, and then a day later you were telling your friends about this hilarious thing that happened, and you tell them the story, and you're like, I fell off the bridge and whatever, broke my nose. But it's not funny in the moment, right? It's funny a couple weeks later. It's funny when you start to get some distance. It's funny when you start to be able to get some breaths around it. That breakup was not funny until and when you were 14, until you tell it when you're 30, that breakup was really funny. Maybe, maybe. So just that way of finding space around what is not funny until we can maybe start to lighten up with it, or have it as a plaything. And I find this creatively too, so that thing that's really painful right now, you're just aware of it. Eventually you hold it and give it some support, and then eventually it's part of your creative repertoire, it's part of your arsenal, it's what you create with, it's what you play with when you're creating some music or a show, or that's the material. But when it's really close, when it's really tender, it's hard to do that, I think. So this is a Pema Chodron quote, who's wonderful. She says, the first step is to see yourself jealous, see yourself frivolous, see yourself wallowing in self-pity. You think to yourself, well, what would Dr. Seuss do in this situation? Instead of using it as ammunition against yourself, you can lighten up and realize it's the information that you need in order to keep your heart open. So yeah, this idea that we don't have to play with everything all the time, but eventually if we do hold those places, if we do pay attention to those things that we want to push away from ourselves, then eventually we can play with them. Then eventually we can maybe see them with some lightness. And this is supported by this idea that, play must be supported by safety. When there's safety, people will naturally play, is one of the ideas. At least children will naturally play. Adults, I think, with enough time, will just start to play if they really sense safety. I've been with people in sessions where there's some pretty serious trauma that they're holding in their bodies and have had to carry for a long time. And if there's enough safety there, what was it the other day? I think somebody was crying, and I think I asked her to, or I suggested that she take some breaths because she was finding some ground again, and I think I just told her to breathe through her nose, but her nose was full of snot, and she looks at me in the middle of like this huge, teary, whatever was happening, and just like laughs at me. She got angry at me. She's like, what? She didn't get angry, but she got like snippy with me. She's like, you want me to breathe through my nose? And it switched, and the crying actually went to laughter, and then it went back to crying, and then it went back to laughter. But there was that ability to, even in those really tender moments, to find that play or that lightness. And for me to be, as a therapist, or to be willing to laugh, and to be willing to go there with people, and to be willing to find that safety that can create that play, and willing to play there, and honor people in doing that, I suppose. And so that acceptance, acknowledgement, appreciation, we're getting to the end, so well, let's see. I had a little idea, but I'm going to go on. Because this is just, maybe goes back to what you mentioned before, which So these are the basic principles of play that I have in some of my workshops. And so this idea of play is pro-possibility rather than pro-positivity. So this idea that play doesn't look like a smile necessarily. I'm doing a show actually next weekend, and I come on with a smiley face and this stupid song about smiling, and I'm absolutely heartbroken. And then at the end of it, I squish the balloon, like I kill the smile. So, and it's so satisfying, and it's so fun, and it's hilarious, and it's good, and I love it. And so, yeah, this idea that it's more about having options, so not getting stuck again in having to call this the floor if we don't want to, if that doesn't work for us anymore. Or having to stay in with our sister in that like really heavy conversation. We could, that's totally fine, but maybe there's another possibility. Maybe we could give ourselves another option. It's more human rather than superhuman. So that idea of having to cut parts of ourselves off or get rid of certain aspects of ourselves, that's not necessarily what play is about, but rather about playing with all those aspects and welcoming them into the team. And that relates to this last one, which is the ability to play with our rules rather than be played by our rules. So to be able to play with our rules rather than be played by our rules. And again, that comes down to awareness, that comes down to mindfulness. Let me see if I brought it. I didn't bring it. I was going to bring the ball. Okay, it's okay. I'll survive. So the idea in clown theory. Thanks. The idea in clown theory, I'm not a mime though at all, so this is going to be awful, is that if you think, usually I have a big yoga ball, let's expand it. Oh, now I've got two. All right, seriously not a mime, so don't be judging me, don't. This idea that, in clown theory, one of the things we look at is this idea that if you have a ball, the surface of the ball is all the infinite possibilities of who you are and what you do and how you do it. And there's infinite, so it's the point of you, and it's past and present and future. And so the idea that it's you when you were 14 and you did have your heart broken. That was really bad. It's the you when you used to get so excited for Christmas. It's the you when you first took a plane ride. It's the you when you felt so awkward when you were standing in front of everybody. It's the you when you're crying yourself to bed, to sleep in bed alone at night. It's the you that really longs for that thing that you can't get. It's the you. It's all of those possibilities. It's the you when you're 79 and I don't know, sitting on a park bench. It's all of those things. And the idea in the clown world is that the player or the clown is the one that's inside of that ball. And so the idea with the player being inside of that ball is that player is greedy, that clown is greedy, and that clown wants to play with all those different possibilities of who you are and what you do and how you do it. And so, but the thing is, like that point where you were crying in bed alone, it's not always so funny. So what the clown does, or what the player does, is it takes that little point on the ball, pretend that this is the surface point, and it extends it, and it pulls it out, and it gives you some more distance, and it makes it bigger until you can look at it with a little bit of perspective, a little bit of humor, and us exaggerated, we're pretty hilarious when we actually get into what it is we're doing and when we can't hide them. And then that starts to be funny. That starts to be an art piece. That starts to be a sketch. That starts to be something that I can kind of get a little chuckle on, even if I'm in the middle of it sometimes. And it wants to play between all of those. And like I was saying in the beginning, sometimes that's the greatest indicator for where I'm at is like, oh, I can't play with that thing there. Oh, I can play with that thing there. Oh, I can't play, oh, that needs some attention over there because I can't, it's not funny. And it's a little way that I use to just see where I'm at. And so one of my thoughts, oh, we're at the end. So, yes, maybe, I'm gonna keep going and I'm gonna, so here's one of the last slides, and then maybe I'll get you to do just a tiny reflection and then we'll go And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. But it says, play is the ability to swing between various speeds, emotions, and bodies without getting stuck in any particular way of being. Cultivating playfulness means building a swing set, a plethora of ideas, emotions, speeds, bodies that you can call on that will best serve the various situations and relationships you encounter throughout your day. So maybe just one thought before we close. It's just, I had a few questions, but just one thing you'll take away from today. And maybe just turn to the person next to you or to find somebody around you. Just one key thing that you'll take with you tonight from anything that's been said. Take maybe a minute.
Finding a way to reframe yourself, so carry your role, again, shifting your reframe to reframe, helping I found myself and so this whole idea of like, getting the bouncing out of it, getting high above it, getting out of it, and looking at it differently, finding someone to help you figure it out. One of the ways this helped me, help me like I think acknowledging it.
Take another 30 seconds.
I think it's like taking it outside, like creating it.
This is easy to explain as
Another 10 seconds or so.
This idea about step outside of the role you're in or to exaggerate the role you're in. And never make us deeper in any spirit. Right into it.
So, Good talking. Glenn was my teacher at City University. And now he's sitting in here and I can tell him. Well, that's a wonderful mask. So that's what I mean about masks. It was just, can I say what you would just redo? It was just like you turned into like a little boy. Yeah. That's a nice, and we switch in between them all the time. We have so many different ones that we're doing. I've turned from like, to like, I'm confident to, what am I doing to, there's a multitude that I'm flipping between. Yeah. And you can start to see them in others. Oh, they're playing that mask. Oh, they're playing that mask. And when I say the word mask, I'll just say, or role. I guess I'm using the word mask right now. I'm realizing I just switched vocabulary. But role is what I was talking about before, to play your roles rather than be played by them. And the same with your masks. I would say to play your masks rather than be played by them. And to be able to be seen through your masks rather than be hiding behind your masks. So those are all little clown ideas. So just to